What is not a bullet you dodged but a huge tactical nuke you dodged? In uni, me and my two best friends were drinking, playing Mario Kart, and just shooting the shit. We were hungry and wanted food. I said let's just to reheat a ready-made pizza from the freezer because we've been drinking and most delivery services were closed at 1:30 a.m. One said he's fine to drive. I said no bad idea. I took the keys of the driver but he had a spare key and they left when I went to the bathroom. Got to the living room and they were gone, looked out the window and his car was gone. He got the other guy to go with. McDonald's usually doesn't take 2 hours to get, so eventually I went for a scooter ride since McDonald's was less than 2 miles away. I noticed there's a taped-off spot on the bridge right before McDonald's with a crane, cops and an ambulance. They curbed the car and drove it off the bridge and into the shallow creek top first, and died on impact. I dodged the nuke of death but ate the bullet of survivor's guilt for nearly 5 years. The second floor of the house I was renting collapsed a month after I moved out. When I was 11 I started losing vision in my left eye, and eventually went completely blind in about 2 to 3 weeks. After lots of testing we found that I had a brain tumor in my left optic nerve that would likely spread quickly. They gave me a year and a half to live in the best case scenario with treatment. They got the eye surgically removed, started me on radiation and chemo, and luckily I responded well to it. Cancer's long gone, and now a cyclops, and happy to be disease-free. There was an apartment I really wanted but at the last minute I found a slightly better one. The apartment I almost moved into burned to the ground a month later. I had some chest pains one night, and woke up my wife to tell her. She got a little scared that it might be a heart attack and we agreed that I should go to the ER. The nurses were pretty sure it was a false alarm but would run an EKG as is common practice. In my head I was hoping that the chest pain would come back, not to prove a heart attack, but so that we can find out what the chest pain was. The EKG was done by one veteran nurse and a new nurse. I was watching over their shoulders. Something was flashing on the screen that made both nurses look at each other with disbelief. They ran it again and one nurse went out to the station for help. The other stayed with me and very nicely told my wife and daughter to go back out to the waiting room. A few seconds later 5 to 6 more people came into the room slowly and calmly and began prepping me for something. It turns out that I was having my second heart attack that night in the ER. The doctors and nurses found an obstruction in my heart and were prepping me to have it cleared and a stent placed. When I got out of surgery, the doctor who placed the stent told me, "You probably picked the best time and place to have a heart attack, right here in the ER." I used to own a gym with a partner. I sold my half of the company and took a boring but stable government job about 3 months before the pandemic. Damn, any hard feelings from your ex-business partner? No, he wanted to buy me out for a while and I gave him a good deal. I'm sure he's kicking himself now, but he was pushing for it for at least a year. I just wasn't ready at the time. When I was 16, I had a good friend whose father was a wealthy businessman of some kind. This is Chicago, and I guess his dad started screwing around with the wrong guy's woman. My friend told me it had something to do with the mob or a mobster's wife. I never knew for sure, but do know that I saw firsthand his dad get threatened, at a tennis court of all places, by 2 well-dressed clearly Italian men who drove up in a black Cadillac. I was sitting right there with his friend as they talked to him, and it was exactly as I imagined it would be in the movies. My friend said there was a contract on his dad. He actually said it like it was cool, and at the time, I guess I thought it was too. I was invited to go with them on a fishing trip in Lake Michigan that week, my friend, his dad, his dad's friend, and I. 2 days before the fishing trip, something happened with a member of my family, and we had to go to Cincinnati for a few days. When I returned, I learned my friend's body was found floating in Lake Michigan. He was wearing a life vest. His father, his father's friend, and the boat were never found. Police questioned me about what I knew and who I'd seen talking to his dad. But I think I was lucky that I said I couldn't describe what they looked like and didn't get wildly specific. Either way, the coolest kid I knew, Chris, was dead. And they never found his dad, the dad's friend, or the boat. It was a nice boat on a calm day on Lake Michigan. And something bad happened. Always felt I dodged getting caught up in something I wouldn't have escaped from. On a road trip in college with 4 friends. We stopped halfway for a pit stop because I had explosive diarrhea and was getting more sick by the minute. Friends carried on to Vegas and left me with one of the guys who rented us a car to return home. The friends that carried on got into a rollover, one died, two will be injured for life. Back in college, ex cheated and got preggo. Blamed it on me, involved her family and all. I was willing to file a case in court with medical legal as needed. Ex got too pressured as I was talging to her dad about medical tests etc. Out of nowhere she admitted that I wasn't the father, and it was some classmate she had a fling with. We went to Thailand in 2003 for Christmas. I spent a number of years there in the early 90s as a kid, and loved it so much that we were gonna do it again the next year. Spend Christmas watching the sun come up on a beach at Phuket again. We had the tickets and everything, but because of some new fallout from an Enron-adjacent scandal, my dad wasn't allowed to leave the country. He wasn't implicated, but was in the C-suite of a credit card company, and all such people were under travel advisory. Anyway, the very hotel we were gonna stay at got 100% wrecked by the tsunami, so I guess we got lucky. My aunt and uncle were on the beach that morning just before the tsunami hit. They had scheduled a boat tour, but when they got there, the boat was broken and the owner had to cancel. They were standing on the beach trying to figure out what to do with the rest of their morning when they saw the tide pulling way out. My aunt and uncle happened to be seasoned sailors, so they knew that was a precursor to a tsunami. They ran up and down the beach telling people to get out now, but most people just ignored them. They called their grown kids who were on vacation with them and told them to get as far inland as possible. Then they got in their rental car and just booked it uphill. So yeah, they dodged that tactical nuke too. The parents of a classmate were on vacation in Thailand, but they left one day early. I don't know why. The next day the tsunami hit. They might have died if they didn't leave early. My father-in-law was working on construction of a power plant and was scheduled work Sunday, was a union pipe fitter. Saturday he got a call from another company asking him to run a job much closer to his house, think 5-minute commute versus 50, so he accepted and didn't go to the power plant job Sunday. That day there was an explosion at the plant and people in the crew he was working with wound up getting killed. 24 years old, had a pesky sore on my tongue that was really bothering me. My boyfriend's dad was a dentist, so when I was over at his house one night I asked him to take a look. He recommended I go see an oral surgeon the next day for him to check it out. The next day I decided it was feeling better, so I tried to cancel my appointment, but my boyfriend's dad insisted I go. I went, and the oral surgeon pretty much diagnosed it as cancer on the spot. It was aggressive, and by the time of my surgery to remove it, it had already spread to multiple lymph nodes. They ended up removing over half my tongue, followed by chemo and radiation. Given how aggressive it was, I often think that if I had put off the doctor's visit any longer, I probably wouldn't have survived. I'm coming up on my 10-year anniversary in January. I was briefly engaged to a man who has since cheated on his gorgeous, intelligent, sweet wife hundreds of times. They are separated but have 2 children and will likely reconcile. I broke our engagement when he said that he thought it was perfectly okay for a man to cheat on his wife if they'd been married for a while and he'd gotten bored. Oddly enough, he didn't believe a woman was entitled to do the same. I feel so badly for his poor wife now. He began cheating on her 2 years into their marriage when she was pregnant with their first child. My wife and I were prepared to buy a nice riverfront property in 2019, but the owners, her dad and uncle, were dragging their feet. We had our down payment, we were approved for the mortgage, and we had even been living there paying rent. Then the river rose 10 mile and we had to evacuate. The water kept rising. The house was destroyed before we bought it, so we didn't buy it. Guy on Grindr he was chatting with looked cute and we were chatting. He was too far though, and I was a student who didn't have a car, could not host in dorms. He was later arrested for purposely spreading HIV through Grindr hookups. This was in Edinburgh. Walking to work in the winter, halfway through a step forward under a skybridge when an icicle taller than me, 6 foot, and probably 2 around at the base, crashes down right in front of my nose. If my bus had been a half second earlier, if I had walked even a tiny bit faster pace, I would have been impaled from brains to balls. I was frozen in place for a minute, quietly surveying my near death. There was another pedestrian nearby who witnessed it, and the wide-eyed, ashen look on his face as he stared at me confirmed just how narrowly fortunate I was that day. A few years ago I was in a small fender bender. Someone merged into my lane, with me in it, and smashed my driver's side door and their passenger door together. I had pulled my arm in from having it hanging out the window about 15 seconds before that happened. Would have most likely had my arm ripped off. My wife dragged my ass to the dermatologist for a cyst I have had for years. While there, the doc noticed a mole on my ankle that he didn't like. Turned out to be melanoma. Would have never gone if my wife didn't force me. Men being kept alive by their wives since forever. Yes, mine has also kept me alive. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.